What's up guys, Houndish here, and today we're going to jump in and talk about community frustration within the Destiny player base once again. So recently, there have been a lot of conversations going on about the future of the franchise, what we can expect in year 3 of Destiny 2, Destiny 3 and the future of PvP in the game, but on top of this, the annual pass model and what comes after, as well as community issues on certain topics, and Bungie's communication with the community. Destiny 2 is a game that has a lot of problems, but it also remains to be one of the most expansive and promising games in the genre, which I think is why it hasn't died, and that's certainly important to analyze as well. But it's safe to say that sentiment isn't at an all-time high right now, so I want to discuss some of the issues or concerns, as well as why there is a lot of negative speculation. But guys, when it comes to Destiny, be sure to let us know what you think down below. We can't touch on all points of feedback from invested or lapsed players in one place, so definitely say what you think down in the comment section. Otherwise, let's jump into it, and we're going to talk about a few different things today. The first one I want to touch on is PvP. A lot of people are talking about this at the moment. So why is it that players are so concerned about the future of PvP in Destiny, and potentially in Destiny 3 as well? Well, let's look at what's happened over the past few seasons. We've got a lack of new PvP content. We've seen very little content inside of the annual pass drops, no major revisions into PvP content, and even things like Bungie's reprised PvP maps seem to have gone amiss over the past couple of updates. And on top of this, sandbox balance and changes have taken a very long time to be implemented into the game, and I feel like there is no real end game loop for a solely PvP player. And as we've touched on many times, Trials is still missing, and despite community response on the subject, there's been no real communication or indication of something to look forward to on the PvP front outside of the content that we have right now. So when you add to this the fact that we've seen not one, but two major sandbox designers at Bungie leave the studio recently, and honestly all we can really do is speculate as to what this means and why it is happening, but a result of it is that it does increase the level of player concern that PvP doesn't really feel like it has all that much of a future right now. So by looking at the game just as it is at the moment, what we're hearing and seeing over at Bungie and the upcoming roadmap, it's understandable that any PvP-focused players are feeling rather concerned at this point. Now, on top of this, recently, there's been a lot of speculation about Destiny 3 and PvP content. In the past few days, some folks have spoken about a rumor that Destiny 3 will have essentially no classic PvP, and that Bungie are moving away from the arena formula and want to focus on having kind of Dark Zone style areas or open world PvPvE combat zones, right? Now, part of this rumor has some foundation to it. The very credible leaker Anon the 9 did speak about having open world PvP zones in Destiny 3. Aside from this, there haven't really been any credible leaks that actually suggest PvP in an arena or more classic format will not be present in Destiny 3. That's not to say that change isn't going to happen. I'm simply saying that there aren't any solid bits of information that suggest this actually could be a thing, right? But either way, looking at some of the recent Destiny 3 leaks, because they have no real mention of PvP, it does have players concerned, and these concerns are justified because of the stuff that we've just spoken about. And I've got a lot of friends that are big fans of PvP, When I talk to them, it very much feels like they feel like there are few signs of life for PvP right now. And I can understand how that is difficult to get excited about. On top of this, I don't blame the community for speculating on the basis of the leaks for Destiny 3. And that's because, and this is going to be our next point, but Bungie's communication on what happens next is so very minimal right now when compared to what we saw in year 1. So speculation based on what has been happening and what we're hearing is all that the player base really has. For my personal thoughts or guess, I would probably say that Bungie are focusing on some kind of PvP, but are perhaps desperately wrangling with how they can innovate upon it for the next major release, right? And I think with what we've seen with Trials, it doesn't necessarily indicate that there isn't a future for PvP, but it quite possibly indicates that Bungie don't know exactly what that future is right now. So let us know your thoughts about it. However, I personally believe that a Destiny 3 or a future D2 with little or no PvP focus absolutely would not be a good thing. It just feels incredibly bread and butter for the game to have Crucible. On top of this, there is still a passionate and talented PvP community, and I know a lot of people would move away from Destiny without having some kind of solid PvP focus in the future. So guys, let us know how you feel on that subject. But now let's talk about communication a little bit. I feel like this is an area where there is this big void, this kind of giant hole in the wall where last year, when Destiny very much needed saving, we had a massive amount of communication about where things were headed. Bungie spoke about how Destiny would fundamentally evolve, and right now that isn't really happening. So whether it's PvP content, which is suffering especially badly, or whether it regards other key areas that the community are worried about, that bigger feedback loop kind of feels like it's died a little bit. I would, however, say thank you as a community member to the community managers of Bungie, because they do their absolute best to take on board what people are saying, respond to the issues, and give a sense of connection between us and Bungie. The reality is that the people over at Bungie work very hard, and for most of the community, this is a systematic complaint, right? Not a personal one. I just think it's fair to say that. It doesn't, however, change the fact that there is a significant difference between right now and pre-Forsaken. Throughout year one, where arguably most of the game was in a much worse position, it's also fair to say that, but we did have consistent communication about where things were going. We knew that Bungie were working towards a total sandbox rework. They kept the conversation alive. Many developers and leaders at Bungie spoke about how Destiny was going to evolve. They also hosted big community summits and kind of PR events at the time as well, which did contribute to this sense that Bungie were making big moves to take on feedback and respond to player concerns. And I wasn't present, but I know many positive things which we now have in the game we potentially wouldn't have had, or at least not to the same degree without the kind of feedback, and that includes that community summit. So partly, I think that we do need more communication about the future, but also, really I'm trying to highlight how having this level of responsiveness and feedback last year, compared to what we have now, whether it's exactly right or wrong, whether it's needed or not, when that communication stops or slows as much as it has, it feels bad regardless. There are a lot of things that Bungie have gotten right with year 2, but there are a lot of things which haven't worked. And currently, sentiment on certain issues is pretty bad, take the enhancement core situation. This has been ongoing. After many months, it still feels like the community are saying one thing, and Bungie very strictly believe in another. They have, however, recognized that most of the community wants to see Infusion changed, and since their last post, this was communicated by Cosmo, so we'll have to see what happens. It is, though, nonetheless an example of what ends up being received as very poor back and forth, and this generally makes a lot of folks feel like Bungie aren't really in tune with the community, or that they simply disagree with the community on the whole, and neither of those things are good things. In addition to this, everybody has a bigger question about what happens next. Bungie are no longer with Activision. They say that they want to show us a Bungie-controlled roadmap and what that looks like. But when is that going to happen? How are Bungie going to manage producing content for this game and a Destiny 3? PvP players wonder if there'll even be a reason to play the game at all when it comes to the content drop in September that we are hopefully getting. But players wonder if Bungie will listen to feedback on subjects like enhancement cores and infusion. Are exotic catalysts still a part of the weapon system at all moving forward? Will RNG and progression continue to be tuned to respect player investment? Are faction rallies, or factions at all, gonna be a focus moving forward? Is a Trials-like PvP mode ever set to return to the game? You can add to this list a whole bunch of things, and we can't always expect answers, right? However, when communication changes the way it has, for whatever the reasons, players notice it and things feel different. Last year, the future was on a roadmap, right? It was in the conversations that took place with all kinds of devs at Bungie, and not just community managers doing their best to keep a lifeline open. But now, the future consists of a lot of question marks, and these are coloured by frustration and fatigue. And that's not to say the game is trash, or that you shouldn't have fun, or that you shouldn't disagree with the general community sentiment. However, I think that sentiment is very real, all opinions aside. So again, let us know your thoughts about how Bungie are communicating us stuff. I don't want to be all harsh to Bungie, and that's certainly not what I'm trying to do. I'll talk about that more in a moment. But let's talk about the annual pass content model. Does it work? Is this even what Bungie really wants for the game? Or is this indeed something that Activision wanted more? Regardless of the questions that we can't easily answer, the good thing about the annual pass is that we get more content than we've ever had. Some folks may disagree because they don't particularly enjoy the content or its delivery, but it's still true that this has been the most content-packed couple of years that we've seen in terms of Bungie delivering new stuff to the game. One of the things that makes the annual pass drop different is the pure content focus. So with Black Armory, it was forges. We had a handful of weapons or quests, but in an annual pass drop, we don't get new strikes, massive new locations, or endgame systems that span across the entire player experience, As a result of these being smaller, less expensive drops, Bungie have to focus in on that core element, right? So for this season, it's Gambit Prime. We all know how mixed players feel when it comes to Gambit. So naturally, there are a lot of folks who were turned off immediately. And I think to some degree, at one point, Bungie probably banked on Gambit being generally a little bit more popular than it is. And you'll have to pardon the pun there, that was actually a total accident. But so, if you're not a huge Gambit fan and you wanted bigger PvE or PvP experiences outside of that, it's understandable that this season or the content drop isn't very appealing, and in itself, that is something that we're not necessarily super used to happening. Mostly, when we see these big expansions, they touch on so much stuff that there is generally a decent level of appeal for every player, and naturally, that has diminished to some degree inside of the annual pass model. But back to the subject of selecting the content for annual pass drops, seeing as Bungie can only really produce 1 or 2 core things for a seasonal DLC, it's only natural that they go with the safest and most appealing thing that they can actually produce, right? And then nearly all of the resources for that drop go into that piece of content. And this is another reason that PvP probably hasn't seen much content, because it's expensive to make, and if it can't be used as a core selling point to the widest possible target audience, then it's going to end up getting less attention, but it's still going to be very expensive to produce. And let's remember, Bungie are almost certainly stretching their resources to some degree because they're managing going solo. They have lost development teams over at other studios, but they still have a big content lineup that players expect them to produce. So inherently, you can start to see why things are the way that they are right now. The question is, though, how can Bungie do better? I'd love to hear what you guys think. Would you love to see an annual pass model moving forward? Do you like the content that we're getting right now, or do you think Bungie could somehow produce more content or different types of content that would work better, maybe in a different format? This is a community discussion after all, so be sure to let us know how you feel below. One thing is very true though, as many people have said, now that Bungie are in full control, expectations have been set, and they really do have to do a pretty incredible job with the next major beats for the franchise. You know, whether it's September, Year 3, Destiny 3, pretty much all of it, they can't really afford to mess anything up. And maybe that's the reason that things are so quiet as Bungie manages this. However, there needs to come a time, soon, where communication about the future picks up again, and I think players, especially very invested players, want to know where things are headed and why it's still worth investing into the game. We know about Penumbra, and I think we should remain realistic about what the third pass drop will probably look like, but the Bungie-controlled roadmap really begins after the summer of this year. I think these conversations will be most important as we approach Year 3, and again, how you guys feel is really the most important thing here, so let us know your number one concern or any issues you have with the game right now. And hopefully, as Bungie do their thing, they're going to be receptive to the feedback from the players. So yeah, give us your overall thoughts down below, guys. It is all useful feedback for Bungie, but the one thing that I think we should be careful of is putting down the creatives at Bungie. For me personally, as someone who creates content and has worked in other artistic or media formats, it isn't necessarily easy to continue to make great content or to be passionate if you feel that your work is being put down or continuously criticized, right? And I'd like to say that most of us in the community feel the passion and we can see the love that the developers of Bungie do put into the game. And despite the fundamental issues or the systematic issues that many of us talk about within Bungie, most of us really do appreciate how hard individuals work to produce the things that are amazing about Destiny. So while we give feedback, and it's okay to be critical and it's okay to get frustrated, I think it's also worth thanking everyone who's a part of creating Destiny, and also the community that's a part of celebrating it. I freaking love Destiny, man. And that's why I talk about these things personally. I'm just trying to offer the perspectives that I see as someone who witnesses a lot of what happens in the community. And I can also relate to the majority of players and their emotional response to what's good and not so good about Destiny. So I'm just trying my best to kind of represent some of what's going on right now. Again though, let us know your thoughts down below. This video ended up a lot longer than I thought it would, so we'll leave it there, guys, but hopefully the future for Destiny in general is going to be a very positive one. Drop your thoughts down below. If you've enjoyed the video or have an opinion about it, a rating below is very much appreciated. But otherwise, thank you for listening, guys, and I will catch you all very soon.